Okay, so Dragon Ball villains. Pretty cool, pretty memorable. Also kinda shit tier. This is something I actually brought up in one of my more recent reviews where I was talking about Black. You know, so far he seems like a really interesting character with like some legitimate motivations, and it's something that's really been lacking in Dragon Ball villains. We haven't really had two legitimately well-written or interesting villains in the Dragon Ball franchise. And this led to people kind of coming to the defense, and it's like, oh no, like they have these motivations and this stuff, and I feel people kind of misunderstood what I was trying to get at there. What I mean when I say that Dragon Ball villains are shit tier, or at least the majority of them are, is that they don't have legitimate, like, interesting motivations. Their motivations are usually very simple things like, you know, they just want power and control, or they're all about just kind of chaos, and, you know, they're not necessarily deep, complex characters with some type of, with a more complex motivation behind their actions. They're just kind of evil for the sake of being evil, and that's all we really get. You know, and I can just go through all of the Dragon Ball villains, you know, right now and just kind of explain what I mean. First off, Peel Off Red Ribbon Army, completely shallow villains. They're all about power and amassing it. I don't think anyone's ever going to argue that. Same thing with Tao Pai Pai. You know, no one's really going to argue that those villains aren't, you know, just pretty much just bad guys for the sake of being bad guys. Yeah, and for a good chunk of that, you know, they're also, you know, gag villains. So I don't think really people are going to expect them to be more complex characters. The first real legit villain the franchise has is Piccolo Daimao, and he is evil because he is evil. He is all about just destruction and amassing power and ruling everything, and he doesn't have a motivation behind it. You know, he has a reason for being evil, that he is the evil embodiment of God himself, but he doesn't really have like a motivation for his actions. He's just, you know, once again, he's evil for the sake of being evil. And it's not even like he's like the pure embodiment of evil, because Ma Jr., who is the reincarnation of Daimao, is, you know, like he's rehabilitated. He makes a heel to face turn, and, you know, Piccolo becomes one of, you know, the most popular good guys of the franchise. So it's not like he really had a good, strong motivation for being evil. Like I said, he is just evil for the sake of being evil. Then we move on to the Saiyans. Once again, evil for being evil. They revel in how bad they are. One of the Namekians even says to Vegeta, "You don't have evil in you. You are evil." You know, and you know, they're completely morally reprehensible. You know, terrible fucking people, and they're just terrible because they have the power to be. They are super powerful villains, and, you know, they enjoy destroying, and they destroy just killing people, and, you know, fighting and destruction. They just enjoy it. It is just part of who they are. And once again, not really good motivations. You know, Vegeta does have, you know, that kind of backstory of like, oh well, he was forced to do this by Frieza, but like the Saiyans were shitbags before Frieza. Frieza just utilized them because they were shitbags. And then, you know, then we go to Frieza, who is the quintessential evil for being evil. He is the guy we really know the least about. You know, he doesn't have, like, some sort of, you know, like, you know, he was a good person who was turned to evil, or, like, you know, he thought he was doing some sort of greater good, or anything for his terrible actions. He is all-powerful, and to him, you know, because he has all this power, it is his place to rule everything. You know, he doesn't have a driving motivation other than he just wants to amass more power, control more planets, and just strike fear into anyone who would even question him. He is a character who is just, you know, driven by power. That is it. It is the lowest common denominator for villain. He has nothing going for him other than the fact he is a bad guy. The artificial humans, first off, 16, 17, 18, not even really bad. They're just kind of, they have powers, they get confronted by the Z-Fighters, they get into some fights. They don't really are committed to doing bad things. They're just kind of dudes. They don't give a shit. You know, the one, you know, like 16 could be considered bad because, you know, his whole programming is to kill Goku. But the one bad thing he wants to do, he was programmed to do it. Same thing with 19. Dr. Gero is the one that programs him. We don't know why he's, he wants revenge. He wants revenge for the Red Ribbon Army. Well, why? He's just kind of this murdering sociopath. He just, once again, the Red Ribbon Army just wanted to amass power. They were just, these, again, shit-tier villains. And by extension, he's just another shit-tier villain who is just like, now I want revenge. And I want, to just, now I'm going to rule the world with my artificial humans. And I guess is what he was going for, that and killing Goku. He doesn't really have, once again, any interesting drive or motivation. Same thing with Cell. Cell kind of had an interesting motivation because he was driven by his goal for perfection, to reach his perfect form. So he did bad things instinctually. That's a cool concept until he reaches his perfect form. Then he's just a generic bad guy. There's no reason for Cell to be a villain past obtaining his perfect form. He might want to test his powers, set up the Cell game, and, compare his powers to everyone else. But, there's really no purpose for him to be a villain, though. He could just be like Goku and Vegeta and just want to spar and train and push his personal powers past everyone else to be that perfect being. But there's really no reason for him to just want to kill and destroy. And, by the end of it, he is just out to kill and destroy. He has no problem with wiping out the planet. He just wants to, get this challenge. But the thing is, though, as soon as he gets that challenge, he does the same thing that every other Dragon Ball villain has done up until this point. Oh shit, I'm no longer the strongest person. They start freaking out. And he can't handle not being the strongest. So then what was the point? Once again, just, bad guy for the sake of being a bad guy. The arc needed a villain. They needed him to be irredeemable so Gohan could kill him. And that's it. He is there to facilitate the need to have a villain. And that was it. They could have made him a good guy. They could have, had him try to, search out a deeper meaning in his life. Now that he had obtained perfection, has some sort of realization in himself. And they don't do that. He just is a villain. We transition to Majin Buu, and honestly, Majin Buu is, as much as I don't like the arc itself, Majin Buu as a character is probably one of the more interesting villains at this point, because he's not really evil. He does terrible things because he doesn't know any better and he's being misled. And he has this really childish mentality. He is this basically a demigod with this toddler's mentality and understanding of the world. He doesn't understand why what he's doing is wrong, and as soon as he is told that it's a wrong thing, that it's bad to kill, it's bad to destroy, it's not his place, he immediately is just like, oh, and stops. He doesn't want to anymore because he now has context that his actions are terrible. But, he was just kind of pushed into it by Babidi. And once again, Babidi, shit-tier villain. We don't know anything about him, why he does what he does. He is just a villain for the sake of being a villain. We never get any context or, kind of any development into his character on why he acts the way he does. So there you go, all of these villains up until this point, with the exception of Majin Buu, are just evil for the sake of being evil. Kid Buu, I would say, is he isn't a terrible character. Like, Super Buu definitely is just terrible. He's basically just perfect Cell, but even less interesting. And then we have, Kid Buu, who is, he's just this wild animal. He's just this uncontrollable force of nature. He is literally an embodiment of evil and chaos and destruction. All he wants to do is destroy, and he can't be reasoned with. He can't, you can't reason with him whatsoever. And once again, is that really an interesting character? I mean, I'd say that's more interesting than Super Buu, but it's still, he's just a mindless animal at that point, and you can't really call that a great villain. We get the GT. And, there's Baby. Baby is a character who actually has a motivation. He has a backstory. We understand why he does what he does. His whole goal is to basically restore the Sifurian race. and to get revenge for the Saiyans. Because it's not like, like when other characters have gone for revenge, it's like, oh, well, I was doing shitty things, and like the Z Fighters fucked me over, and now I want revenge. This is, we were this technologically superior, kind, very chill race that was completely slaughtered by this terrible race, the Saiyans. So, him wanting retribution for that, wanting vengeance, to make right out of the wrongs that had happened to his people, that makes sense. That makes him a deeper, more interesting, more complex character than anything we've had up until this point. Then we get to Super 17, he's shit tier, the evil dragons, they're shit tier, they're evil. They're evil because they are the embodiments of evil, and that's not necessarily an interesting drive or motivation for a character to just be evil because they are evil. And, Dragon Ball Super honestly hasn't really done much better. Beerus, really interesting character. I really like Beerus as a character. The idea that he is this guy that he's a bad dude, but he just kind of doesn't view people on humanity or life as anything valuable because it's just all beneath him. He is a god. Why does he care? It is just, he has this flippant nature towards the entire idea of existence and life, and it holds no personal value to him. He doesn't do malicious things, or he doesn't do evil things maliciously. He just does them because, oh, well, this bothered me. Get away. Just get away from me. Just wipe it out. He wipes out planets with the way we would swat a fly. It is just that level insignificant to him. So, Beerus, very interesting character. So then, at this point, we have Beerus, we have Baby, we get Champa. Champa's just more to say, oh, I'm sorry, we have Golden Frieza. I've already established Frieza's shit tier, and now he's just motivated by revenge. So it was just more shit tier villainy. And now, finally, we have Black. A character who really could potentially rise above everything else. He talks about how he's seen the universe in this greater scope, that he has this context that no one else has, and that humanity is a wretched, terrible thing, and very specifically, he wants to wipe it out. Why does he want to wipe out humanity? We don't know yet. It could end up being, really thought-provoking, and, really elevate his character, or it could just give a really terrible reason, and his character will just plummet into mediocrity. But he has the potential right now, from what we know, to be an amazing character if they stick this landing. And that's something that the Dragon Ball franchise hasn't really had, is just a villain with really great motivation for the terrible things they do. They're just, every villain up until this point, for the most part, other than, take Baby, take Beerus, put them in their own little special villain bubble. And I guess you can put Champa in there too. He's just more the same with Beerus. Just put them all in their little bubble. And, all the other villains, though, have been just kind of these lazy shit tier villains who are bad guys for the sake of bad guys. Some have had, there's like the villains in the bubble right there who, had like some more interesting concepts to them. But, here we have a villain who could potentially have a legitimate drive and motivation for the terrible, terrible acts he's committing. That in his mind, he's doing the universe a greater good. And that is a really interesting concept for a villain. Something that we've never seen, where a villain feels that his actions are just and he is righteous in them. Because no villain up until this point has legitimately felt righteous in their actions, that they were committing terrible, terrible atrocities for a greater good. And that is what I think makes a really great villain, when you have a premise like that. Will Black stick that landing? I don't know. We'll have to see where it goes from here. But I think he has a lot of potential, and he has way more potential, I think, than any Dragon Ball villain has had up until this point. So hopefully I kind of clarified what I meant by that. You guys understand where I'm coming from. And that, you know, the villains up until this, I mean, obviously they're engaging in like entertaining villains, but they're not necessarily complex. You know, they're fun villains to hate, you know, but they're not villains that you can sympathize with or have any connection with. They are just punching bags for the good guys to kick the shit out of in the end. And here we have a potential for a villain that could be a lot more, and that makes him really, really, really goddamn interesting to me. Hopefully I explained myself well enough that you guys get where I'm coming from. Hopefully I won't get any more shitty, stupid, retarded comments of people fucking, like, arguing with me and thinking I'm retarded and thinking I don't know what the fuck I'm talking about. Probably not, because the internet has an infinite supply of fucking retards to leave shitty comments on my videos. But hey, hopefully though, the people who are confused aren't confused anymore, and you guys get where I'm coming from. Till next time, Zeon, out.